Good morning, friends. We are going to continue our read aloud, The Year of Billy Miller by Kevin Henkes. Yesterday we started part 3, Sister, chapters 1 and 2. If you remember, we were reading about the sleepover that Ned and Billy were going to have, but Ned fell sick, so he wasn't able to come. And his sister Sal was having quite a hard time dealing without Mom and Dad there. So Billy's plan was to still stay up all night that he would have done with Ned. Let's find out what happens next. Chapter 3. Billy crept along the hallway and turned the corner. The strip of golden light that had been shining from beneath the guest room door was gone, meaning Gabby was asleep. Billy crept back to his room and quietly shut the door. He switched on his bedside lamp, then jammed a sweatshirt under the door so the light wouldn't leak into the hallway, drawing attention to himself and exposing his plan. Sal had been asleep for a long time, like a tree dropping its leaves all at once. She collapsed in a heap on the sofa right after they returned from the restaurant. She was probably exhausted from all of her crying, or from asking Billy if she could have his magic pearl, which she'd done about a dozen times in the car ride home. After Gabby had carried Sal up to bed, Billy showed Gabby his Christmas presents. Then they played Crazy Eights. Gabby yawned frequently, covering her mouth with the fan of cards she held. Billy wished that Gabby would stop yawning. It was contagious. He began yawning, too, and felt himself growing sleepy, the last thing that he wanted to be. One more hand, said Gabby, then bed. She yawned again. Already? Asked Billy. I thought we were going to watch a movie or play a board game. His eyes were pleading. Oh, Billy, I can't, said Gabby. It's late, and you're yawning too. We could have a snack, Billy suggested. Are you kidding? Said Gabby. I'm so full from dinner. I feel like I'll never eat again. I still have my food, baby, she said with a chuckle, tipping her head and casting her eyes downward. Seriously, are you hungry already? Not really, but if you were, I'd sit with you while you ate. Gabby twisted her wrist to check her watch. Her bracelets, inches of them, silver and gold, surrounded the watch, jingled. She looked at him up and down. I'm sorry, Billy boy, but it's time for bed. Wait, you said one more hand. Okay, said Gabby. A quick one. During their final hand, Billy held back from playing certain cards when he could have won, prolonging the game as long as possible. But soon Gabby was the winner and he was off to bed. He went to the bathroom and brushed his teeth. He put on his pajamas and crawled under his covers. He said goodnight to Gabby and waited, and waited, and waited. When the house was quiet, he checked to see if the light in the guest room was still on. It was, so he went back to his room and waited some more. When he checked again, the light was out. And now here he was in his room, ready to begin the night of staying awake. He told himself he could do this. He felt a shiver of excitement, then a buzzy sensation. If he made it through the night without sleeping, he'd be a different person somehow, a more important person. His eyelids were the problem. They were as heavy as steel. The situation was worse if he lay down. So he rose from his bed and paced around his room. But the bed was so inviting, soft and warm, that he couldn't help taking a break and allowing himself only to sit on it. He turned his bedside lamp off and on and off and on. He tried to read, he tried to draw, he tried counting backwards from 1,000. He looked at the dragon stamp on the envelope from his silver. Then he took the pearl in his open palm and stared at it until it blurred. He pretended it was really magic. Stay awake, he whispered. Stay awake. Just then an idea came to him. Billy's idea was to scare himself so badly he couldn't sleep. He turned off the lights and sat in the dark on his bed, resting his back against the wall, his legs crisscrossed into a pretzel. He tried to imagine the worst possible things he could. He envisioned a life of his own without Mama and Papa, but that just made him sad. Think. A few memorably frightening scenes from movies danced before his eyes. Think. Some pictures in Papa's big, thick art books were weird and made him uneasy. He recalled them as best as he could. Think. He began to convince himself that there was something hiding in the black space beneath his bed. Think. Then something had white melt flesh with oozing clusters of pimple for his eyes. Its nose was a wet hole that made a whistling noise with each breath. It had a long, stringy gray hair and thin, knobbly fingers and bloody sores all over his naked body. It creaked and rattled and groaned. The thing that he imagined ate children. Its teeth were sharp as needles. It was stretching and reaching for him, stretching, creeping, right under his bed, he imagined. The mattress groaned. The wind whistled. The radiator rattled. The radiator, if you're not sure what that looks like, is kind of like a heating unit. The house creaked. The curtains moved. The shadows vibrated. Billy found it hard to breathe. His heart was pounding. He still had the pearl in his hand and his grip around it so tight that his knuckles hurt. Awful things were where they didn't belong. Awful things were hidden everywhere. Billy repositioned himself. His bedspread pulled as if something were grabbing it from below. Then his room tilted and the walls started closing in on him. Billy sprang from his bed and bolted out of his room. He stopped suddenly. What should he do? Where should he go? He didn't want Gabby to think that he was a baby. He fled down the hall and threw open the door. Sal, he said in a soft voice, but frantic and breathing. Sal, wake up! Chapter 4. Sal's nightlight was so bright that the yellow walls in her room glowed like the inside of a jack-o'-lantern and had an instant calming effect on Billy, the only visible part of Sal among her pillows. The Drop Sisters and her messy blankets were her snarl of dark curls, but it was a familiar snarl and Billy's heart slowed. His breathing steadied. Billy sat on the bed and bounced. The dark snarl moved a little. Billy knew his question was the dumbest thing in the world, but he asked it anyway. Are you sleeping? The snarl moved again. Billy bounced harder, and then Sal's head emerged from the shadowy lumps and bumps of bedcloth and stuffed animals like a chick from an egg. She looked at him with uncertain eyes. Slits, really. Billy scooched near to Sal. He didn't know what to say. He couldn't say, I need you, which is the truth. Hi, he whispered. Sal's eyes closed and her head drooped. Billy shook her. It was strange, but already he felt less afraid. How could a 3-year-old make him feel safe, especially one who was mostly asleep? Although part of him knew there was no monster under his bed, even though he imagined it, he did not want to go back to his room. He wanted to stay here. Billy shook Sal again and blew at her eyes. When she opened them, he blew again. He'd been holding the pearl the whole time, and now he raised it up to Sal's face, inches away from her nose. Sal, look, he said. It's the magic pearl, and I'll give it to you if... Sal perked up, her eyes widened. You will? She reached greedily for the pearl. If, said Billy, pulling the pearl back a bit. If what? She asked. Billy's brain had clicked back to his plan to stay up all night. He could not do it alone in his room, but he thought he could do it in Sal's room with her. He never shared anything this big with a girl before, but it would be worth it. If you can stay up all night with me, it's yours, said Billy. Why? Asked Sal. Billy explained the importance of the idea. He finished by reminding her, we've never even made it to midnight on New Year's Eve. He kept holding up the pearl as if it were a priceless gem, turning it between his fingers, hypnotizing her with it. Can I have it now? She asked. You can borrow it, said Billy, but you can't have it until the morning. How long is it till tomorrow? Asked Sal. It was a good question. I'll find out, said Billy. He went to check the digital clock in the bathroom. He was relieved that he didn't have to pass his room to get there. Still, he was cautious and quick. The red numbers on the clock were clear and bright. 10:32. We've got a long way to go, he thought, feeling some of his optimism drain away. Back in Sal's room, he crammed her throw rug under the door and flipped on her overhead light. They both blinked, adjusting to the change. Now it'll be easier to stay awake, he told her. Sal was fingering the pearl with loving care. How long till tomorrow? She asked again. A long time, said Billy, but we can do it. It's only an hour and a half until midnight. What are we going to do? Asked Sal. What do you want to do? We could play with the Drop Sisters, said Sal. Will that keep you awake more than anything else? Asked Billy. He was willing to do whatever it took to achieve his goal. Sal nodded. Okay, said Billy. How do we play with them? You tell a story about them, and you move them around like this. Sal slid off her bed, pulling the drop sisters with her. She placed them in a circle on the floor. She picked up Raindrop and swooped her back and forth through the air. One day, Raindrop flew. I'm a bird, I'm a bird. Shh, Billy murmured. Your turn, said Sal. Billy chose one of the drop sisters. He didn't think he could do this. He felt self-conscious. He wouldn't want Ned to see him now, or Emma, he sighed. Finally, he said, one day there was a big explosion and the unlucky drop sister felt the jolt like the lightning. He tossed the stuffed whale up a few feet and let it fall and tumble. She was stunned, he said. Then the doctors came to do CPR. Billy took his fist and pumped the unlucky drop sister's midsection, quietly grunting with each thrust. Stop, said Sal, you're hurting her. It's okay, Gumdrop. She pulled Gumdrop to her safety in her lap. You didn't even know her name, she scolded, glaring at Billy. Sorry, said Billy. Papa knows all their names. Sal gathered the other drop sisters and piled them on and around her. Maybe you could just tell a story and not touch them. Her arms circled them, protecting them. No more explosions. Billy wasn't good at telling stories the way Papa was. He was better at doing things. He had a feeling that this night would be longer than he had imagined. He glanced around the room with the hope that something on Sal's walls or shelves would trigger an idea. Billy noticed that Sal's eyelids were lowering again. Hey, Sal, can I use that? He motioned to the dingy pillowcase in which she carried the drop sisters. It was crumpled up at the foot of her bed. What are you going to do with it? It's a surprise. You'll like it. Can I use it? Sal considered Billy's question. Remember the pearl, Billy said, even though he knew one had absolutely nothing to do with the other. All right, said Sal. Billy took the pillowcase, filled it with clothes from Sal's dresser, and bound the open end with one of her stretchy hair bands, twisting it around and around. He left several inches of cloth at the end. He fanned it out. This is the tail, he said. Then he pushed and pulled and fluffed the stuffed pillowcase until it pleased him. There, he said, it's a whale. A big one. It is? Said Sal. Who is it? This is, Billy said, thinking fast. This is Cough Drop? He's the drop sister's cousin. He usually lives at the aquarium, but he's here for a visit. Cough Drop, said Sal, smiling. I love him. Make him say something. He doesn't talk, said Billy, because he has a terrible cough. He was born with it, and the only food he eats is cough drops. Sal plucked Cough Drop from Billy's hands and introduced him to his cousins. They played. Sal would make a comment as one of the drop sisters. Then Billy, assuming the role of Cough Drop, would cough in response. They took turns talking, having a conversation, until Billy had had enough. Cough Drop needs a break, he said. Billy was exhausted and his throat was rough from coughing. He decided that he would never be a babysitter, no matter how much money he could make. Is it morning yet? Asked Sal. No, said Billy. I'll go check again. And then Sal said something. But she was yawning at the same time and she put her hand over her mouth, so all Billy heard was a tired little noise. When he came back to Sal's room with the disappointing news that it was only 11:03, Sal was sleeping on the floor beside the drop sisters, her head on Cough Drop. Billy made very little effort to wake her. He made very little effort to do anything. He couldn't. All at once it felt as if his pajamas were made of lead. His legs could barely hold him up, and it took everything he had in him to drag some of the blankets off Sal's bed, fall to the floor next to her, and cover both of them. He would give it one more try. He raised his head and opened his eyes as wide as he could. Stay awake, he commanded himself. A swift, invisible hand pressed his head down and stitched his eyes shut. He tried to conjure up an image of the monster under his bed, but he didn't have the energy for that. His head knocked into Sal's as he searched for some comfort on Cough Drop. Sal stirred. Love you, she murmured. She could have been talking to Drop Sisters or Cough Drop or him. He didn't know, but he knew he loved her, right now anyway, and he might have told her so, but all he could manage to mutter was, yeah, and he drifted off to sleep. All right, tomorrow we will continue with chapter 5 of part 3.